Hey guys, today we're going to read some Mocha. After I find my place, wherever I am, chapter 7. Yeah, I found my place. So guys, let's get started. Three more chapters. So guys, hope you enjoy the series. Oh yeah. When Charles awoke the next morning, Thanksgiving Day, he took a look out of the window. Then he rolled over and snuggled down deep into the flannel-lined coziness of his sleeping bag, glad that he did not have anywhere to go. It was rainy and gray and cold outside. Charles didn't see any ice on the window, though. Maybe it was just a yucky day. Maybe the storm warnings were wrong. Anyway, the good news was Uncle Stephen had promised to go back to the store for the lemons. Charles and Becky had forgotten, according to him. Caroline and Kim always stayed open at least until noon on holidays, just for last-minute needs like this. When Charles finally got up and headed into the living room, Mom was watching the Weather Channel. "I don't know, Stevie," she told her brother. They're still saying that temperatures are dropping and this rain will start to freeze. You go out in weather like that unless you really have to. I've got snow tires and four-wheel drive," said Uncle Stephen, as he shrugged into his jacket. "I'll be fine. He petted Mocha and Buddy. You two are in charge," he told the puppies. "Make sure no one gets into trouble while I'm gone." He turned to Aunt Abigail. "Need anything else besides lemons?" he asked. "Last chance." Charles felt bad about forgetting the lemons, but he knew that Uncle Stephen enjoyed spending some time at the store, most mornings hanging out and chatting by the wood stove. The lemons were really just an excuse. Aunt Abigail sat on the couch next to Mom. Both of them were peeling potatoes. She paused for a moment, thinking. "Nope," she said. "I think we're all set, and we really could live without the lemons too." "Are you kidding? Your lemon tart is my favorite. There's no way I'm missing out on that," said Uncle Stephen. He headed out the door, and Charles watched from the window as his car puttered down the driveway. As far as he could tell, the car wasn't slipping or sliding, so there was no ice yet. "Charles had about giving us a hand," his aunt asked. "It would be great if you could take these peeled potatoes into the kitchen and put them into the pot of cold water on the counter. Then you can bring us the bag of carrots right next to it." Charles looked around. Where were Becky, Stephanie, and Lizzie? Obviously, they'd all found better things to do, which left him stuck with being Aunt Abigail's servant for the morning. Actually, he didn't mind. He was used to helping out in the kitchen, and it was easy work, even though it was cold and gray outside. It was warm and snug inside. Mocha and Buddy snoozed near the living room wood stove, and all the lamps were lit, casting a happy glow. For the next hour or so, Charles was content to carrying things back and forth, find things in the fridge, and search for things in the lion cabinet and the dish cupboard. His dad helped too, and they joked and talked while they set up the extra card table and carried chairs in front other rooms. "Well," said Aunt Abigail a little later as she looked around the kitchen, "I'd have to say we're about set." She took a long, happy sniff. "That turkey is beginning to smell absolutely." Before she could finish her sentence, the kitchen went dark. "Oh no, uh-oh," said Dad. That's not good. Suddenly it was very quiet in the house. The Weather Channel guy wasn't talking anymore. The fridge wasn't humming. The furnace wasn't whooshing. Aunt Abigail opened the back door and stuck her hand outside. Not good at all, she said. It's still pouring, and now it's cold enough that it's all been turning to ice. As soon as it lands, a tree must have fallen on a power line nearby. Charles poked his head out. Wow, he said. It's kind of pretty. Every branch on every tree was already covered in a shining coat of ice. Coated the walkway to the barn. It coated the Pearsons' van. It covered the bushes, the bird bath, and the little statue of a toad in the garden. Charles stepped out into the back deck for a better look, and immediately went sprawling. The boards were covered in ice and as slippery as a skating rink. Guys, I'm sorry about that background. My cousin's just like getting jackets and stuff. Bye. Ow, he said, rubbing his behind as he reached up for his aunt's hand. Pretty maybe, but very treacherous. I wish your uncle were home. Aunt Abigail frowned and pressed her lips together. I wonder if the phones are working back in the kitchen. He went straight to the phone on the wall. By then, Charles' mom and all three girls had gathered to find out what had happened. The bean had just woken up from a nap. He rubbed his eyes and whined, upset, just because everyone else seemed to be upset. Mocha and Buddy scampered around underfoot. They didn't seem worried at all. Aunt Abigail picked up the phone and listened. She shook her head. No dial tone, she said. She let out a long sigh, and even if Stephen remembered his cell phone, there's never signal down there at all at the store. Then she sprang into action. Stephanie, Becky, round up all the candles in the house. Paul, can you bring some firewood in from the back porch? And Charles, maybe you could check the wood box in the living room and bring me an armload of small pieces that I can use for kindling if we still have to have our Thanksgiving dinner. I'm going to have to fire up this old beast. She patted the big black iron cook stove that sat along the wall of the kitchen. That really works? Charles asked. He had always thought it was just for decoration. It usually had some pretty old bowls displayed on its shelf and a big vase of colorful dried flowers. Sure, said Aunt Abigail, not that I've used it much lately, but since it runs on wood, it's on excellent backup. I doubt my electric stove will be doing us any good today. When the power goes out like that, suddenly all at once, without any flickering, it's usually a sign that it's going to be out for a while. Days, maybe. Stephanie and Lizzie gasped, and Charles could imagine just what they were thinking. No phone, no internet, no DVDs. He grinned. He could live without any of those things. This was going to be the kind of adventure he could enjoy. What about the food in the fridge? Mom asked. It'll stay cold as long as we don't open the door too often, said Aunt Abigail. If the power stays out for a long time, we might have to start setting things outside to stay cold. Charles went to get the kiddling with both puppies trotting after him. When he came back, Aunt Abigail and Becky were just emerging from Aunt Abigail's pantry, each lugging 2 big D's. We keep them filled for emergencies. Like this, said his aunt. Without electricity, our pump doesn't work. We'll have to make the water last. That means no bathing and no flushing, Becky added. Well, just not flushing too often, said Aunt Abigail. It sounds as if you've been through this a few times, Mom said. Aunt Abigail nodded. It happens, she said. It's not so bad. What about a generator? Dad asked. We've talked about getting one, said Aunt Abigail. Lots of folks around here have them. They run on gasoline, and you can start them up when you lose power. They'll keep everything going, from your fridge to your computer to your TV, but they're expensively loud. Before long, the living room wood stove had been stroked, and candles were lit all over the house. A fire cracked in the big black cook stove. Aunt Charles and Becky sat at the kitchen table, near its warm bulk, waiting for the hot chocolate Aunt Abigail had promised them. Mocha lay at Charles' feet, an easy reach for petting, and Buddy snoozed at the cook stove. Everything was cozy and sweet, and all was well, except for one thing. Uncle Stephen was still not back. Guys, Chapter 8. Aunt Abigail paced up and down in the kitchen, a worried look on her face. Every so often she picked up the phone and listened, then put it back down. I haven't heard the sanding truck go by, she said. Maybe Stephen is just waiting until they've sanded the road. That ice can be awful slidey to drive on until they've spread sand or salt over it. She nibbled at a fingernail. It's weird. Usually the local road crew is on top of everything. They take good care of our roads. Whether it's a holiday, the middle of the night, whatever. Normally Neil would have driven the town's big truck up and down our road at least a couple times. I'm sure everything is fine, Charles' mom spoke in the soothing tone she used when the bean was upset about something. You know, Stephen, he's just hanging out down there, cracking jokes while he waits until it's safe to drive, that's all. Betsy's probably right, and Charles' dad, but he glanced at Mom. I'm starting to feel as if I ought to check things out. If there's been some sort of emergency, I can help. I have my first aid kit in the van. Mom frowned. How can you possibly drive on these roads? I can't, admitted Dad. I was planning to walk. I have those ice gripper thingies. I can attach them to my shoes. Still, it's dangerous to be on the long road, said Aunt Abigail. What if a car comes along? They might not be able to stop in time even if they see you. You could go the back way, said Becky. That would be even easier because you can crunch through the layer of snow in the woods and fields. Dad nodded. Sounds good, but I never gone that way. We'll show you. Becky jumped up. Mocha scrambled out from under the table, ready for action. Charles and I took the path yesterday. I know the way really well. Charles held in a groan. He was not exactly excited about going out in this yucky weather. Once again, Becky was pushing him past his comfort zone. Dad thought about it a moment. Okay, he said finally. I suppose it's not a bad idea to have a few people go, so that someone could come back with a message if we need more help. Or, he added quickly, when Aunt Abigail's face fell, to tell people back here that everything's all right. Charles and Becky found their hats and gloves and put on their boots and jackets. Buddy was still curled up by the stove and barely lifted an eyelid, but Mocha pranced around, waving her curly tail and making eagerly dashes toward the door. Why don't you take her with you? Mom asked. She needs to get outside at some point and burn off some of that puppy energy. Aunt Abigail found 2 more pairs of ice gripper thingies and Becky showed Charles how to stretch them over the bottoms of his boots. Too bad we don't have any for Mocha, Becky said. Good thing she have toenails. Mocha toenails didn't do her much good when she headed out the back door at full blast, only to go sliding off the porch and onto the crusted snow in the yard. But she picked herself up and shook herself off, her tail still wagging. She gave Charles a doggy grin. That was kind of fun. Better than lying around all day anyway. Dad inched his way to the van and he grabbed his first aid kit. He slugged it over his shoulder and then set off. It took a while to get down the icy driveway. Then they walked along the sides where the crunchy snow did give a little traction, but Charles could tell that one thing step, even with the grippers, would mean a slippery sliding fall. The rain had stopped. A thick glaze of ice covered every branch of every tree, so that their limbs dropped sadly. Some large branches had broke under the heavy weight and lay scattered around on the snow and in the driveway. Still, Charles thought it was beautiful. In a weird day, a bush covered with red berries, each one increased in each ice, made a splash of color against the gray sky. The ice glittered even in the low light, and when the wind blew, you could hear them musical against each other. Crunch, crunch, crunch. Mocha led the way as they inched across the silent, empty road. She found the beginning of the path through the woods. Fallen branches littered on the ground, and Charles glanced up nervously at the trees above them, cracked and swayed. It sure looks different today, he said. He wondered if Becky would have a hard time finding the way. Dad touched Charles on the shoulder. Okay, there's sport. I'm fine. Charles reached down to pet Mocha, who walked by his side, picking her up through the snow. She glanced up at him happily, and he felt better. He had his new friends with him, and if Mocha wasn't worried, why should he be? Becky moved confidently, following what was left of the path. Charles recognized the few landmarks: a big boulder, an old spreading tree, near a stone wall, a stream that trickled between snowy banks. After about 10 minutes in the wood, they came out into a field and crunched across the undisturbed snow. Then Becky veered toward a group of tall pines, now drooping under their icy coating. Almost there, she told Dad. A few moments later, Mocha pricked up her ears as they emerged from the pine grove. She pointed her nose toward a group of buildings that had come into view. Charles recognized the store. They made it, but something looked different. As they got closer, Charles realized what it was: the towering maple tree that shaded the store's porch. In summer, had toppled across the road. One of its huge branches had smashed through the windshield of Uncle Stephen's car and hiked his first aid kit back up onto his shoulders and began a run. "Stay back," he called over his shoulder to Becky and Charles. "Keep Mocha out of the way and steer clear of any power lines that have fallen down." He sprinted toward the store, crunching through the snow. Chapter 9. Guys, I'm going to get some water. And I disappeared. Wow. Guess I have to last without water. Chapter 9. Becky turned to Charles, her hands over her mouth. Her eyes were wide with fear. "Don't worry," Charles touched her shoulder. "It'll be okay." He tightened his grip on Mocha's leash. "Come on," he said. "Let's go find out what's going on." He led the way across the field toward the store. By the time they arrived at the side of the road, Dad had checked out the car. He stood up and waved to them. "It's all right," he said. "Nobody's inside the car. He must be in the store." Charles felt Becky grab his hand. He felt out a sigh of relief. "Your dad's fine," he told her. "The tree must have hit his car." After he parked and went inside, Becky began to run clumsily through the current snow, and Charles followed her. They'd met Dad on the slippy porch of the store, and all the lights were on there. The cable sneaked through the store, delivering power from the generator that Charles could hear throbbing from underneath the floor in the basement. Uncle Stephen sat in Casey's cafe near the wood stove with a group of men. He pushed his chair back and jumped up when they came in. Then he opened his arms to Becky, who ran toward him and buried her face in his chest. "Sweetie, what are you doing here?" he asked. "We were worried." Her voice was muffled by his jacket. "You didn't come home." Uncle Stephen patted her on the back and smiled. "Don't down at her." "Well, now you know why," he said. "I guess my car's not going anywhere for a while. We tried to move the tree, but it won't budge. Then we had to push 3 cars in a row out of the ditch. By the big turn, now we're just trying to figure out what to do next. The town's truck is trapped behind that tree, so Neil can't sand the roads. Dean's truck is stuck up that long, steep driveway, of his and whined. Must be busy pulling folks out of the ditches. I know. No, your mom must be worried, but I didn't feel like I could leave until we work this out. Caroline came over with a tiny tray of mugs, coffee, hot chocolate. She asked, "Oh, and look, who had came to visit again." She smiled down at Mocha. "I'll go fetch a dog biscuit." She put down the tray and headed toward the front of the store with the puppy prancing along behind her. "Mocha already knows where the biscuits are," said Uncle Stephen. "She's right at home, isn't she?" He turned back to the others at the table. "So what next? Can we think of anybody else with heavy equipment? We're going to need a truck or a tractor with a pretty good winch on it to move that tree." Everybody thought for a moment. "Patrick," said Neil. "He's just down the road. Doesn't he have an old tractor?" Other man shook his head. "He took it apart this fall and never got it all put back together." Kim came over with a plate of donuts. "Look, like we've all stuck here for a while," she said. "I can't provide my turkey dinner, but here's a snack anyway." Charles sat with his donut and hot chocolate, watching as Mocha visited with each of her new friends. He felt warm and sleepy, sitting next to the wood stove. He could see that this storm was causing trouble, and he knew that soon he had Becky should probably head back to the others, that everyone was safe, but for a moment he was happy to sit and see what happened next. Finally, Mocha curled up next to the wood stove and sighed a happy sigh. She was content too. Then Charles saw her head pop up. Her ears twitched and her eyes grew bright. "What do you hear?" he asked her. He listened too. Over the noise of the generator, he heard a higher-pitched throbbing, the sound of an engine. "Who's that?" Neil asked. "Sounds like a tractor." Everybody ran to the door. There, thundering down the road, was a big green tractor, chains on its enormous tires. A man in the black coveralls and a big fur hat was the wheel. He drove toward the down tree, then turned the tractor around and backed up until it was near it. He cut the motor. Then he swung himself down from his high seat and stood scratching his head as served the damage. "Got a winch?" Uncle Stephen called from the porch as he pulled on his jacket. The man nodded. He went to the back of the tractor, bent down, and started fiddling with something. "Excellent," said Uncle Stephen. "We'll be able to attach a cable to that tree and pull it out of the way," he explained to Charles. "I want you to stay up here while we work, though." Becky and Charles watched from the porch as the men clustered around the tractor, climbing up cable near a large branch. After a while, the man in the coveralls climbed back into his tractor and started it up. The tractor's engine powered the winch. Winch began to turn slowly, taking up the steel cable with a creak and a groan. The tree began to move. "Watch out!" yelled Dad as the top of the tree slid off the hood. As Uncle Stephen's car had landed hard on the snowy ground, Charles could feel the thump all the way up on the store's porch. The winch kept turning, and the tree kept moving as it got closer to the tractor. The man got at the wheel, pulled the tractor forward. Finally, the tree began to slide on the icy road. He drove his tractor right across the road and towed the tree. When the road was clear, Neil and Uncle Stephen into his road to sand. He called out the open window as he saluted the man in the black coveralls. Trust them, job. Thanks, pal. Charles and Becky watched as everyone clustered around the tractor, talking excitedly. When the driver climbed down and they shook hands all around before moving toward the store in a group, the man in the black coveralls pulled off his fur hat as he came up into the porch. Becky gasped. Her mouth fell open as she stared at the man. She looked at Charles and raised her eyebrows. Then she turned to the man and pulled something out of her pocket. I think this is yours, she said, handing him the red silk handkerchief. It sure is, the man said, smiling. He reached out for the square of silk, but before he could take it, Mocha snatched it out of Becky's hand and ran off, her tail held high as if she was proud of her prize. Charles could tell by the way she looked over her shoulder that she wanted to be chased. Ha ha! Look what I have! Don't you want it? They all watched and laughed as the puppy slipped and slided on the icy porch floor, tossing the handkerchief high into the air and catching it. She shook it with little puppy growls. She let it fall to the floor, and she rolled on it. She picked it up again and pranced around proudly. It's okay, said the man. I have others. He stuck out his hands to shake Uncle Stephen. Sorry, I was too rushed. So to introduce myself last time. Sometimes I get a little too caught up in my business. And even thought I'm supposedly retired anyway. I'm Archie Ignalls, Uncle Stephen introduces himself, and everybody else. Then they all trooped into Casey's cafe, where Caroline had coffee and hot chocolate waiting. You did a great job with that tractor, Uncle Stephen said to Archie as he stirred cream into his coffee. Good, obviously. Know your way around heavy equipment. He nodded. I've been around big trucks and machines all life, he said. I'm a builder. Ignalls Construction, said Dad. You're that Ignalls, the one who built all those skyscrapers, hospitals. Archie Ignalls called down at his cup. That's right, he said. I started out at 16 hammering nails, worked my way up, and eventually bought the companion. He shook his head. I retired a few years ago, or at least I tried to. Turns out I can't stand to have time on my hands. That's why I came out on the tire tractor today. I couldn't get into the city. My cell phone was dead. I just needed something to do." He grinned. "Had to bust through my fence. That silly iron gate was stuck shut. Without the power on, don't know why I ever put that thing up. I'll be back down as soon as all the ice melts." Charles and Becky exchanged glances when they heard the word gate. Charles raised his eyebrows and Becky nodded. "We can use a guy like you around here," Caroline was saying. "There's always lots that needs doing in a town that size. I've been thinking about a community garden for next spring. Do you have a tiller attached for that tractor?" He nodded. "A snowplow, too. I was thinking I could plow out a pretty nice skating rink on that lake." "That would be fantastic," said Kim. "The kids around here would love that. Wouldn't they, Becky?" Charles looked over at Mocha lying near the wood stove with her head on the red handkerchief. Maybe she belonged with the guy who had saved her life. "Taking care of a dog would keep you busy too," he suggested. "Mocha still needs a home." But Archie Eggnog held up his hands and shook his head. "Not ready for that kind of responsibility," he said, laughing. "But wait. If you live behind that gate," said Becky, "what about those barking dogs we heard?" Archie Eggnog gave her a look. "So that was you pushing my doorbell the other day." "So we just wanted to return your handkerchief," Becky said in a small voice. He laughed. "The dogs are a recording," he said. "Another ridiculous idea. It's just like I need high security for my little cabin." "Is it?" He told them about the cabin he had built at the top of that long driveway. "Made it from trees I cut down myself, all from my own land," he said proudly. "The place is tiny, but it's all I really need." Caroline had a thoughtful look on her face. She turned to Charles. "Is Mocha available for adoption? I thought she belonged to you." Charles and Becky looked turns, telling Mocha story. Archie Eggnog looked into his coffee cup, embarrassed, when they said what a hero he had been to snatch her out of the way of speeding traffic. By the time they finished, Kim and Caroline were looking at each other and nodding. "We've been wanting a dog for a while," Kim said. "A general store needs a dog, a meter, and a greeter for all our stuffed customers. And Mocha is so friendly and so mellow. She'd be perfect store dog. Do you think she'd like it here?" "Are you kidding?" Charles asked. He knew Mocha would be in heaven, making new friends every day. "Look at her." Mocha lay by the wood stove, gnawing on a chunk of firewood. She looked back at the group, smiling faces, and thumped her tail. Weeks later, the Petersons were still talking about it. "That was the best Thanksgiving ever," said Charles to his mom one afternoon just before Christmas. "Archie Eggnog didn't even seem to mind that there was no lemon tart," Mom teased. "Those pies that Kim and Caroline brought made up for it, didn't they?" Charles nodded. It had been fun to see everyone everyone gathered around the table, lit by candles all down the center. The house had been cozy, warmed by the wood stove, and even without any power, Aunt Abigail had managed to create a memorable feast. She had not been fazed for 1 second when Uncle Stephen brought home 3 extra guests. She just told Stephanie to find a few more chairs, and they were all set. I think Mocha found a great forever home. Don't you? Charles asked his mom. I do, said Mom, and now when we go up there, Buddy can visit his cousin too. She smiled at Charles. Dr. Elvis had called them with the DNA results. Just that day, it turned out Mocha was part German Shepherd, part Bernese Mountain Dog, and part Beagle. Buddy was mostly Golden Retriever and Jack Russell Terrier, and also part Beagle. Charles reached down to pet Buddy's soft ears. No matter what you turned out to be, I would love you just the same, he told his puppy. You're 100% fantastic. Charles' Thanksgiving had been full of adventures, but he was happy to be home. So guys, the end. And